Gadol Elohai Shiru ki gadol Elohai Kol echad yireh ki gadol Elohai. ראוי להלל, ליבי ישיר כי גדול אלוהי. שם מעל כל שם, אותך ראוי להלל, כי גדול אלוהי. How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? And all will see how great, how great, how great is our God. כל אחד יראה כי גדול, גדול אלוהי. גדול אלוהי, שירו כי גדול אלוהי. כל אחד יראה כי גדול אלוהי.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
You know, I've got 2 Shabbat Shaloms up there. Doubling up so I can catch up.
Double portion.
Is it a double portion this week?
Double portion? No, it's not double.
Okay.
It's the same. You should have known that when you went to read it.
I was wondering, maybe I missed something.
Well, we read the one on the right first. I don't know when we're gonna read the one on the left.
I don't know if I like that. I'm the one that's supposed to be funny, Chris.
I'm certainly not trying to take your place.
Well, you shouldn't leave so much slack behind.
Yeah, no, I'm a slacker. Okay. Did you like the way it did the screen? Did anybody
That
catch
was
it?
really nice.
It was really nice, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. You worked hard on it.
It kind of reminds me of the art in the next room over.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I had a different picture last year. I don't know if y'all remember the picture last year, but it was different than this year. But it was still Miriam. Miriam, the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took a tambourine in her hand, and all the women went out after her with tambourines and dancing. And Miriam sang to them, "Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and his rider he has thrown into the sea."
It's a song that was
That's a great song.
some years ago. Yeah. And somebody then reminded the singers that were singing that song, not in the Bible, but in real life. God loved those people too.
Oh, yeah. Well, think about it, you know, and Alvin was taught this morning, you know, Miriam was Aaron and Moses' sister, but she was 12 years old when Moses was born. So at the end, when Moses was 120, Miriam just died. She was 132. I mean, she was really old, I guess. Not really. But
And it's interesting, we learned this morning, the sister of Aaron, she was also the sister of Moses, but it doesn't say the sister of Aaron and Moses. It just says sister of Aaron.
right.
And maybe it was prophetic that she thought of this before Moses was even born.
I don't know. It's interesting. Yeah, I was gonna do things just a teeny bit differently this morning. We have the blessing, and I didn't go over this last time, but we're reading that from right to left. So the words are, "Blessed are you, Lord our God." So you're starting on the right side and going to the left. So I didn't want people to be confused about how it's, you know, they look up there and say, "Who the universe king of our God?"
Well, it matches the word above.
Right. And, you know, last week we were talking about Proverbs 28:4 that says, "Those who forsake the Torah praise the wicked, but those who keep the law fight against them." And 28:9, "If one turns his ear from hearing the Torah, even his prayer is an abomination." What is forsaking the law and not listening to the law? What is forsaking the law and not listening to the law?
Doing or not doing?
Lawlessness.
It's lawlessness.
Those who practice lawlessness.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's refusing to hear and refusing to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's the opposite. God says hear and do. And those two Proverbs say listen and do it, or there's consequences. In Hebrews 10, you know, this is in the New Testament, Hebrews 10:26-31. "For if we go on sinning deliberately after receiving the knowledge of the truth, there no longer remains a sacrifice for sins, but a fearful expectation of judgment and a fury of fire that will consume the adversaries. Anyone who has set aside the law of Moses dies without mercy on the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. How much worse punishment do you think will be deserved by the one who has trampled underfoot the Son of God and has profaned the blood of the covenant by which he was sanctified and has outraged the Spirit of grace? For we know him who said, vengeance is mine, I will repay. And again, the Lord will judge his people. It is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. And I never heard that read in sermons. As a matter of fact, I don't think I ever heard that read in a sermon in my life. Did y'all use it much, Alvin?
No.
Too scary, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that's why in the blessing it says we're sanctified in his commandments. And we're commanded to engross ourselves in the words of Torah. Because if you're sanctified in it, what does that mean?
It means you're cleansed, you're baptized in it.
Another
Washing.
way that I've heard that is that to be in the business of Torah.
Wow. Be in the business.
That our walk is all about the business as we rise up, as we sit down, as we go out and walk by the way, and as we sit down in the house.
Right.
All of it.
Sanctification is clean.
Right. Well, sanctification is being set aside for a purpose.
Yes.
Set aside for a purpose.
Washing the bride in the word.
And, a lot of times we don't realize what effect we have on people the way we live. I have one of my famous stories that some of you in here have heard, but it's been so long since I told it that most of you don't. But I have a company, and I used to have, there's not many of us left because we're kind of winding down, it seems like, in my old age. But anyway, I had a young man that worked for me. I was off in San Angelo, Texas, at a cell phone company. We were a customer. And we were at dinner one night, and I told a joke to these 2 guys I'm old enough to be both of them's father. I mean, they were young guys, and I was, I don't know, 50, you know what I mean? Yeah. And I told them this joke, and I shouldn't have told the joke. It was from my misguided youth. And one of the guys looked at me and he said, Paul, I've never heard you use language like that. Why would you tell me that?
Oh, wow.
And I was mortified.
Yes.
I mean, just cut to the heart. And that's what this is talking about. It's talking about if you're going to live the life, don't betray God. You know what I mean? And so when we read the blessing and we're talking about being sanctified in his commandments, remember what that means. And remember how that's why we're here, is because we want to follow what his word says and make it important in our lives. Okay? So, join me. Blessed
are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us in his commandments and commanded us to engross ourselves in the words of Torah.
And in Hebrew.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu le'asok b'divrei Torah.
Okay, so the title comes from the first verse of the reading, which can be literally translated to say, and it happened when Pharaoh sent out the people. So it says, Pharaoh, what is Pharaoh doing?
Get out.
Yeah, the 10 plagues have happened, and he's showing them the way out of town, out of Dodge, so to speak. The reading tells of the adventures of the Israelites as they leave Egypt, cross the Red Sea, receive miraculous provision, in the wilderness and faced their first battle. So, pretty exciting stuff, right? Did y'all, if you read it, was anybody excited when you read it? Okay, so we're going to have the pillar of cloud and fire, the crossing of the Red Sea, and the pursuers drowned, the song of Moses and Miriam, the bread from heaven, the water from the rock, and Amalek attacks Israel and is defeated. So what did I leave out?
Axis.
The
axis.
Oh. The bitter water made sweet. They go to the pool, the Meribah, spring of Meribah, where the bitter water is. And what happens to the bitter water? It's made sweet. How is it made sweet?
Tree.
The tree of life goes into the water to make it sweet. Who's the tree of life? Yeshua. Okay. Now we get to read. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them along the road to the land of the Philistines, even though it was nearby. For God said, the people will change their minds and return to Egypt if they face war. So he led the people around toward the Red Sea along the road of the wilderness. And the Israelites left the land of Egypt in battle formation. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, because Joseph had made the Israelites swear a solemn oath, saying, God will certainly come to your aid. Then you must take my bones with you from this place. They set out from Sukkot and camped at Etam on the edge of the wilderness. The Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to lead them on their way during the day, and in a pillar of fire to give them light at night, so that they could travel day or night. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night never left its place in front of the people. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, tell the Israelites to turn back and camp in front of Pi-Hahiroth, between Migdal and the sea. You must camp in front of Baal-Zebon, facing it by the sea. Pharaoh will say of the Israelites, they are wandering around in the land in confusion. The wilderness has boxed them in. I will harden Pharaoh's heart so that he will pursue them. Then I will receive glory by means of Pharaoh and all his army. And the Egyptians will know that I am Yahweh. So the Israelites did this. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds about the people and said, what have we done? We have released Israel from serving us. So he got his chariot ready and took his troops with him. He took 600 of the best chariots and all the rest of the chariots of Egypt, with officers in each one. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the Israelites who were going out triumphantly. So, the logical shortest route of the Israelites to the promised land was down to the Mediterranean and crossed through to the Philistine territory. But God didn't want to go that way. And he sent him out by the way of the desert. So, did Moses know the way? That way through the desert? That's where Midian was. That's where he was living, right? So he's actually taking him the way that he knows. But why? What's spiritually speaking, what's going on here? So when it says about they go by the way of Midbar, by way of the desert.
It's in the middle of the Sinai going down to where the path to get across the Red Sea is. There's no out.
Right. But what's going on here? I mean, when God says, I'm going to send you this way, he says you're at Etam, and I'm going to send you to Pi-Hahiroth, which is the mountain, the gorge. So they're going through this long gorge, and it comes out on the Red Sea, and there's a big beach area there, and that's where they're going to cross. So he tells Moses, he said, I'm going to send you down here, and Moses knows where the mouth of the gorges is. I mean, it's not an unknown place.
There's a military base there.
It's a military base. There's kind of a little town fortress thing there. And So he tells him, I'm gonna do this so that the Egyptians will realize that I am God. And so what's the purpose here?
To show the Egyptians that he is God.
To turn
Well,
His glory.
but who is Pharaoh?
He's Pharaoh.
I know
He's the
that
owner of
Pharaoh, he's the owner of the slaves,
slaves.
but he thinks he's God too,
Right, yeah.
you know. So the whole point being is that he says, I'm gonna go down there, the Egyptians are gonna follow you, and I'm gonna get rid of your slave owner.
They're being lured down there. And they take the bait.
Like fish in a barrel.
And so, what's the you're gonna get approval. What's the manifestation of the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire at night? In other words, when they get on the trail, God comes out and he's leading them through a pillar of cloud in the daytime, pillar of fire at night, so that they can travel day or night. So they can get there quickly, I suppose. So what is the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire?
The Shekinah.
Well, it's God's glory, it's a manifestation of his glory, but
It's their covering.
I understand it's your covering. But think of it. If we would have invaded in World War II in Normandy, and this big cloud had come up with us in the daytime and led us onto the beach, and then it turned into a pillar of fire at night, and so we could fight day or night. Does that sound insane? Yeah. I mean, think about it. Did Pharaoh and his army, did they see the pillar of cloud, pillar of fire?
Yeah.
They
It's
had
between
that.
Pharaoh and Charlton Heston, I remember.
Well, what I'm getting at is,
If they didn't see it then, they certainly saw it when it moved to the back of them to protect them.
right,
Right.
but the point I'm getting at is, this isn't common stuff.
Right.
I mean, you know, it's kind of like, being married for a long time. And, you know, you've got your ways of doing things. You know what she's gonna do. She knows what you're gonna do. You used to argue about it, but you kind of, you're okay, that's just the way it is. So you just know. Okay. Well, it's the same thing here. There's no people that have left the country and they've got a God that's in a pillar of cloud or fire leading them around. We read this all the time and we're just so familiar with it, we think that it's lost any kind of impact on us. But think about it. I mean, Pharaoh must have really had some ego. If he says, you know, they left out of here and there's this pillar of cloud leading them, and at night it's fire. What do you think that is? You think that's their God?
And he can see it as the days as he's chasing after them.
Right. But what I'm saying is it's a fantastic story.
He's supernatural.
Supernatural story. But that's what I'm saying. Pharaoh must have had a really huge ego. But
It might have been bigger than he was.
it was bigger than him. But the pillar of fire in Hebrew thought is likened to a king who carried a torch for the benefit and the honor of his beloved sons. So when they came out of Egypt, God was a torch. He was a pillar for his beloved sons. And what did he tell Moses to tell Pharaoh when he said, you're going to lead them out of Egypt? He said, Israel is my firstborn son. If you don't let them go, I'm going to kill your firstborn son. And so all this stuff that has been predicted, everything comes true. I mean, nothing that God said I'm going to do, that he don't do. And so can you see where Israel would say the king is carrying our torch. He's our light in the night, and he's our guide in the day. And that's the most important thing that that Israel didn't understand. I mean, they were being led. Pharaoh could see it and didn't believe it. And Israel was in the camp being led, and they really didn't believe it. I mean, here in a little while we're going to read about when they get trapped, they're going to say, why did you lead us into the desert? Just so we could get killed. Is there no graves in Egypt? And how many times did they say that? Has anybody ever gone back and counted?
10 times?
About 10 times.
It was each time that they murmured.
Yeah, every time they murmured or something happened. But what's the point being? Pharaoh had an unbelievable view of his ability. And there was a certain element in Israel that couldn't accept that God was with them. They're on the opposite ends of the spectrum. Pharaoh thought that he couldn't be defeated, and Israel thought that they could never make it even if God was with them. And that's the same way we are.
And we look at the physical rather than the spiritual.
Well, but we look at the Torah and say, well, there's no way we can do that. We might as well just give up now. I mean, we've been taught, I don't know. Back at our old church, Jim Smith became preacher there in 1984, and he implemented this thing where he kept all the attendance rolls and what you gave and all the stuff. He accumulated information, and every year he would give all the congregation got a packet, and it just told how many times you were in church, what you had volunteered for, what your contributions were. I mean, it wasn't public knowledge, it was just for you. It was a personalized deal. And nobody knew what their packet had in it. But every year, you could see how many times you were in church. Were you there 52 weeks, 50 weeks, 40 weeks? I was there 2 weeks. Did pretty good this year. Double my attendance. But what I'm saying is that you don't live your life by checking off stuff on a list. You say, well, got my Shabbat done this time. Well, I did my daily reading. I'm doing good. Well, I prayed this morning. I prayed. I'm not saying that stuff is important, but it's not a checklist. It's not something I'm doing because I have to do it. Okay? You do it because you want to do it. You do it because if you don't do it, you don't feel good the next day. Just because you say, well, what did I miss? Oh, I forgot to do that. So there's all these things that are hidden in here that we don't relate to our lives. But we're like Israel. We're told that the law is too hard and nobody can do it. But on contrary, God says, I'm with you day and night. Pillar of cloud, pillar of light. All you have to do is read it and lean on me, and I'll show you the way. That's what he told them.
And he said it's not too hard for you. You don't have to go to heaven to get it, or cross the sea or the ocean to get it.
That's
It's in
right.
your mouth.
So,
He said he'll come back in a cloud too.
that's right. He left this way, he's coming back that way. But the point I'm getting at is that right here in the beginning, we're seeing that God says, I'm gonna be with you always. And that's what he demonstrated to the Israel people, that he would be with them always. If they would have just been realized who they were, maybe it could be a different world today. Reckon? I don't know. Okay. 14:9 through 14. The Egyptians, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, his horsemen, his army, chased after them and caught up with them as they camped by the sea beside Pi-hahiroth, in front of Baal-zephon. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up and saw the Egyptians coming after them. Then the Israelites were terrified and cried out to the Lord for help. They said to Moses, it is because there is no graves in Egypt that you took us to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Isn't this what we told you in Egypt? Leave us alone so that we may serve the Egyptians. It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. But Moses said to the people, don't be afraid, stand firm and see the Lord's salvation. He will provide for you today. For the Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You must be quiet.
That's cool. Must be on.
So, God had told them to go down to Pi-hahiroth, take a camp, and that he was doing this. And I don't know if he told all of Israel, but he told Moses, hey, I'm going to send you down there so that Pharaoh thinks that you're going to be trapped and he can come and get you. I'm doing this so that I can be glorified. But I guess the rest of Israel knew it, right? He didn't have everybody set up in the database to send a mass text out to inform everybody, right? So when the army caught up with them, and they saw that the Egyptians were approaching, everybody started, what do you call that? Well, I'd say posturing, right? They were posturing.
I think they were planning.
We wanted to be with the Egyptians,
Yeah.
and you made us come out here. Where a few minutes ago it says they were in military form marching out.
Yeah.
Okay, but now their posture has changed. How do you do that? Has it ever happened to you?
Yes.
You got your hand in the cookie jar, and mother says, I told you to steal those cookies. I was getting this for Dad. Okay. So what did Moses say to the people? I like what he said. And here it says he told them to be quiet.
Don't be afraid.
Hmm? He said shut up.
I was gonna say in Hebrew, is it shut up?
He said shut up.
Yes.
He said shut up.
I was thinking,
Then he said, don't be afraid,
Yeah, don't be afraid.
and see Yeshua.
Yeah. See your salvation. See Yeshua. Right. And so Moses assured the people to stand ready to seize God's deliverance. So when we have tribulation in our lives, do we ever take the point and say, I'm gonna be still and see what God's gonna do in this situation? Or I'm gonna figure out what I'm gonna do to straighten it out myself? Or do we pray for his guidance and then try to figure it out? Yeah, go ahead.
I remember in my 30s,
Well, that's a long time ago.
it was a long time ago, but it wasn't that long ago. that I listened to somebody had given me some tapes of David Wilkerson, and it was his first multi-sermon thing. And he said that this was God's prototype, that each of these 10 windows were a window of faith, where they were to keep their mouth shut. And if God brought all of by means of what I could see, what I could feel, that the promise was going to be destroyed, that at the depth of the promise, am I going to place my faith in him? He called it a window of faith. And that this is stuck through to me even till today. It's like, okay, it's all dead. I can't go anywhere else. Okay, God, I believe that you have a plan, and I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. Or I try.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's what I can Zoe can testify this for me. It's the only time I opened my mouth is change feet. See, that's
Change feet?
change feet. You know? Everybody else in here heard the jokes.
And I had used it myself once or twice.
Yeah, it's a good one to use. Because it's self-explanatory. Okay.
I have never read this, but I like this expression. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again.
Yeah.
That's a nice promise.
That
It is.
Yeah, when it's an army,
Yeah,
you're
right.
never gonna see them again.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I like that. Okay, Exodus 14:15 through 25. The Lord said to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to break camp. As for you, lift up your staff, stretch out your hand over the sea, and divide it so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. I am going to harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them, and I will receive glory by means of Pharaoh, all his army, his chariots and horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am Yahweh when I receive glory through Pharaoh, his chariots and his horsemen." Then the angel of God, who was going in front of the Israelite forces, moved and went behind them. The pillar of cloud moved from in front of them and stood behind them. It came between the Egyptian and the Israelite forces. The cloud was there in the darkness, yet it lit up the night. So neither group came near the other all night long. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the seas. The Lord drove the sea back with a powerful east wind all that night and turned the sea into dry land. So the waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with the waters like a wall to them on the right and their left. The Egyptians set out in pursuit, all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen, and went into the sea after them. Then during the morning watch, the Lord looked down on the Egyptian forces from the pillar of fire and cloud and threw them into confusion. He caused their chariot wheels to swerve and made them drive with difficulty. "Let's get away from here, from Israel," said the Egyptians, "because Yahweh is fighting for them against Egypt." So God told them to be quiet and told Moses to quit praying and mobilize the people for action. So, when God tells Moses to be quiet and quit praying and mobilize the people for action, what's he saying? He said, "Back here, I told you. I'm going to lead you down here. They're going to clock in, and I'm going to get you through the sea." He said, "I've already told you, you don't have to ask for guidance. I've already given you guidance." He said, "Get the people ready. We're fixing to leave," right? So that's one of the mistakes that we make. Do y'all know? Do you understand why I'm talking? Sometimes we've gotten our instructions, but we're beating around the bush, still praying, trying to figure out what we're going to do, when actually we know what we need to do. Y'all ever had a situation like that?
We're in Texas now.
Okay, so you made it this far. It's not the promised land, but it's close we get right now.
I feel sorry for all those horses. It wasn't their fault.
Yeah, I know.
They
So,
had nothing to do with it.
so in here, it says that, that God told Moses to get your staff and then raise your hand and part the water, part the sea. But it says then, Moses raised his hand
His hand instead of staff.
instead of his staff. But they say, the sages say, that he threw the staff away, that he raised the staff and threw it away and then raised his hand, because he didn't want this to be some mystical thing, that it was the staff that did it, that it was God that was doing it. Do y'all think that's credible?
Yeah.
I think it might be a sign of authority. He had, I think it's a sign of authority. He had the authority to lift that hand in that sea part. God's authority through him.
So, what's the deal? Now, this is another one that gets me. You got this pillar of fire cloud that's separating you from the Israelites. You're Pharaoh. And all of a sudden, it lifts up and goes off and lets you go into the sea. And this water is stacked up, and you can see it. And you say, you know, he's been holding us back and letting them get away, but now he's letting us through. I wonder what that's all about. You know, it's kind of like, let's think this through just for a minute.
A step before that
Well, they
one
were confused.
Yeah,
is that the sages also say that when God told them to get, that we're going that way, to go part the waters, that one of the guys that was standing next to Moses, and I don't remember his name, he took that to heart, and before the waters had even split, he's wading himself out there, and the water's right about up to his nose, and then when it gets to his nose, the water's part. I just go, okay. But
Yeah.
that's taking action in faith of what God has told you what to do, to actually do it.
yeah, and you're right, because it's the same way when they crossed the sea. They had to wait until the wind blew and the sea parted, and then they went in. But when they crossed the Jordan, they had the Ark of the Covenant, and the priest walked before them, and they walked up to the water, and as they stepped in, the water parted.
And it was at flood stages, so it wasn't at the edge of the bank where it dropped off. It was over the bank and in the shallows as it was going.
Right. But it's the difference between the generation that left Egypt and the generation that went into the land, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, and I've often thought about this, is how did the generation that came into the land differ from the generation that left Egypt?
They saw whatever happened to their parents.
Right.
They were raised on Torah.
Yeah, they were.
Right. Well, the point is the generation that left Egypt taught the generation that entered the land not to doubt God. And it says in Joshua that the whole nation of Israel kept the Torah until Joshua died, and that all that generation. And then that's where Judges starts. So what did the next generation not do? They didn't pass it on like the previous generation passed it. In other words, I think that generation that came out of Egypt learned their lesson for 40 years, and they made sure that their children were ready to go into the land. You know, I mean, it's like a lot of families. You can see families that prepare their family for what's coming. You know, one of my favorite stories is the Whittam family in Garden City, Kansas. Frank Whittam, he had 5 sons. He had ranches. He owned banks. He was wealthy, but his children reflected him. I mean, he had a lawyer, a doctor, a petroleum engineer, a CPA was his family. His daughter was married to a brain surgeon in St. Louis. I mean, they were a picture of him. I mean, 1998, he had bought a jet aircraft and it crashed up in Hays, Kansas in a snowstorm, and killed from it. But his children never lost a beat. I mean, they ran their company business and did everything just like their father. I mean, it was just how and me and a gentleman that worked for him that I worked with, we were really good friends, Leon Nicholson. We would talk about, and Leon, he had a family, he had children, and they were good folks too. But we would talk about how did he get his one boy to be a lawyer, one to be a petroleum engineer, one to be a city. It's like he educated them to carry on the business. I mean, but that's, you know, he was just an admirable guy, and he dressed like a rancher. You know, he had a cowboy hat on, bandana. I was working with a guy, and Frank came through the office we were working, and this guy leaned over and said that his face is worn out 2 or 3 bodies. Because he had this real weathered face, you know. Worn out 2 or 3 bodies. I thought that was pretty cool.
Back to your original point, though, the wilderness generation was the first ones to receive the Torah. Nobody ever had the Torah before them, so it isn't natural that the first generation, the second generation would keep it, and then it would start slipping. Maybe, I don't know. I've always thought the wilderness generation as being the one that got killed off, but actually they were the ones that, you know, started observing the Torah after it was given.
Right.
So that's a different aspect of it. I just had never thought about that.
Yeah. Well,
Maybe
yeah.
it's clear to everybody else, but
Yeah.
you know, Joshua's group he took into the promised land. They've been raised on the Torah, and maybe they weren't sustained by it.
Yeah.
But God was running off all their enemies too, so I don't know.
Well, I heard somebody say, and it might have been Alvin, I don't remember, but every generation needs to have its wilderness time. You know, once we enter the wilderness, we learn the lessons of, you know, how to live and be thankful and understand where things come from. You know, it's not, you know, it's like the psalmist says, he made us and it was not we ourselves. Are you coming to join us, John?
Reminds me of Gen Z today.
That's right, Gen Z. You know, her name is Joplin, so you knew that or not?
I didn't know.
So, what drove the waters back?
The Spirit.
The Lord.
Y'all can't leave until you answer the question.
That's the Lord. The wind of the Spirit.
The nostrils.
Ruach from the nostrils.
My brother.
So, the sages say that God used the natural forces of nature to separate the sea so that the Egyptians would think it's not supernatural, it's something that we can overcome, right? Do you think that's a reasonable thought?
No.
See, and it might be reasonable, but I'm thinking if you lived in Egypt and this guy just defeated all your gods, killed your firstborn, all your cattle, destroyed your crops, and you ask them to leave, and then you go down to the sea, and you think that this is going to work out for you, I think he needed some help.
Who's the he that needed some help?
Pharaoh.
Okay.
Yes, Pharaoh needed some help. But the Israelites needed some help too. I mean, they still didn't believe either. Took them 40 years to learn. If they did. Okay. Exodus 14:26 to 15:26. That looks like a whole chapter there. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea so that the waters may come back on the Egyptians, on their chariots and horsemen. So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak the sea returned to its normal depth. While the Egyptians were trying to escape from it, the Lord threw them into the sea. The waters came back and covered the chariots and horsemen, the entire army of Pharaoh that had gone after them into the sea. None of them survived. But the Israelites walked through the sea on dry ground, with the waters like a wall to them on the right and the left. That day the Lord saved Israel from the power of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. When Israel saw the great power that the Lord used against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and believed in him and in his servant Moses. Then Moses and the Israelites sang the song of the Lord. They said, I will sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted, for he has thrown his horse and his rider into the sea. Now what's going on?
Whenever you printed this, you skipped number 2, and like the first one, now when we get here, this is number 4, but here's on here, it looks like number 3.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Well, that's, okay, to tell you the truth, I discovered the error and I fixed it on here, and I'd already printed these. And so that's the reason it came out that way. It's disguised incompetence.
You weren't supposed to notice that until we quit recording.
Yeah. Now the whole world has to know. Okay. Then Moses and the Israelites sang the song to the Lord. They said, I will sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. He has thrown the horse and its rider into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. This is my God, and I will praise him, my father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is the warrior. Yahweh is his name. He threw Pharaoh's chariots and his army into the sea. The elite of his officers were drowned in the sea. The floods covered them. They sank to the depths like a stone. Lord, your right hand is glorious in power. Lord, your right hand has shattered the enemy. You overthrew your adversaries by your great majesty. You unleashed your burning wrath. It consumed them like stubble. The waters heaped up at the blast of your nostrils. The current stood firm like a dam. The watery depths congealed in the heart of the sea. The enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil. My desire will be gratified at their expense. I will draw my sword, my hand will destroy them. But you blew with your breath, and the sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. Lord, who is like you among the gods? Who is like you, glorious in holiness, revered with praises, performing wonders? You stretched out your right hand, and the earth swallowed them. You will lead the people you have redeemed with your faithful love. You will guide them to your holy dwelling with your strength. When the peoples hear, they will shudder. Anguish will seize the inhabitants of Philistia. Then the chiefs of Edom will be terrified. Trembling will seize the leaders of Moab. The inhabitants of Canaan will panic, and terror and dread will fall on them. They will be as still as stone because of your awful arm, until your people pass by. Lord, until the people whom you purchased pass by. You will bring them in and plant them on the mountain of your possession. Lord, you have prepared the place for your dwelling. Lord, your hands have established the sanctuary. The Lord will reign forever and ever. When Pharaoh's horses with his chariots and horsemen went into the sea, the Lord brought the waters of the sea back over them. But the Israelites walked through the sea on dry ground. Then Miriam the prophetess, Aaron's sister, took a tambourine in her hand, and all the women followed her with their tambourines and danced. Miriam sang to them, Sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. He has thrown the horse and its rider into the sea. Then Moses led Israel on from the Red Sea, and they went to the wilderness of Shur. They journeyed for 3 days in the wilderness without finding water. They came to Merah, but they could not drink the water at Merah because it was bitter. That is why it was named Merah. The people grumbled to Moses, What are we going to drink? So he cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a tree. And when he threw the tree in the water became drinkable. He made a statute and ordinance for them at Marah, and he tested them there. He said, if you carefully obey the Lord your God, do what is right in his eyes, pay attention to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will not afflict any of the illnesses on you that I inflicted on the Egyptians, for I am Yahweh who heals you. So, the sages say there's 50 miracles that occurred at the time of the Exodus. Here's a few. The pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire were sent. So God's glory was with them in a visible form. God hardened Pharaoh's heart so that he would pursue the Israelites, as crazy as that seems, after the 10 plagues. I would say insane, it wasn't crazy. When people went into the midst of the sea, they were within a tunnel of protection. Did y'all ever think about a tunnel of protection?
I thought great big seawalls, not so much of a tunnel.
The seabed was completely dry, not muddy at all, despite the short period of time when the wind was blowing. The Israelites saw the great hand of the Lord as he fought against the Egyptians. In other words, I don't think they saw a physical hand, but they saw a providential hand. You know what I mean? And when the sea washed up the Egyptians, it also washed up their weapons and their treasures. So the bodies didn't come up, but the stuff that was useful to the Israelites came. And that's crazy too. After the Israelites realized their deliverance, they all prophetically sang the song of the sea, word for word, letter by letter, after Moses began with, I will sing to God, for he is high. And so, what does he is high mean?
Exalted.
He's exalted. So, where the Torah introduces the song of the sea in 15:1, it's written, then Moses and the sons of Israel sang. So it's a singular. They all sang as one. What does that conjure up? They all sang as one.
They were echad.
They were echad. But
How blessed are those who are great.
how do they all know the same song? Divine inspiration? What else can you say? After they left the old life of Egypt behind, God made them new creations. Y'all ever think of it that way? Or was Israel made a new creation when they came out of the water?
They were baptized.
They were baptized. And I don't know about all churches, but most churches say when you're baptized, you become a new creation. Is that right? Are we new creations?
And they were also purchased with a price.
Yeah.
I think you're a new creation when you're born again,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily baptized.
The Hebrew says, I will sing to the Lord, for he is high, high. You know, in Hebrew, in order to make, we say very good. But in Hebrew, you just repeat the word twice. And that has the connotation of the word very in English.
Like shalom, shalom is perfect peace.
Perfect peace, right? Anytime it's an action word is repeated, it's saying, notice this, it's very important. So all boasting and pride belongs to God alone, and Pharaoh was judged because he refused to humble himself. So how is the leader of Israel and the leader of the Egyptians contrasted in that? Y'all ever notice that? Moses was supposed to be the humblest man that lived, and Pharaoh was the most unhumble, egotistical person, right? In there, it has a metaphor of suggesting the Lord is a mighty warrior in relation to the power of Egypt and its gods. So it uses the word Yahweh-ish, no, Kamah. And Yahweh-ish is, Yahweh is a man of war, man of war. Yahweh is his name. So, the children of Israel came out in ranks. It says that they were in military formation. So they came out with their heads held high in military formation. God is a man of war. So what's that all about? Why is it important? Okay, so are we someday going to be in the host of heaven? And what is the host of heaven? It's God's army. You know, we sing that song as kids, I'm in the Lord's army, I may never march in the free wild. Y'all remember the song? Okay, well, this is the thing. God is a structured person. There's no other organization on the earth that are like military. What's the military like? It's structured. It's a top-down organization. And that's the kind of organization that God runs. He says, what does he say about, it's not like the rules of military conduct. If you're ever in the army, so they have a handbook. It's got the rules of military conduct. And probably Mr. Cloninger is the only one in here that can speak to the rules of military conduct. Because officers and stuff like that are held to a higher standard. It's the truth. Or it used to be. But what I'm saying is that's God's organization. What do you need? Sit down there and be good. But the reason that it's perfect, because God says my word is perfect, it's true. And if you follow my word, then you're in my rules of conduct. You know, the military rules of conduct. What are God's military rules of conduct? It's the Torah. It's how we live our life. It's how we serve God. And it is a military type organization. Y'all ever think about that?
Right. There is right.
There is rank. And the scripture speaks about those that do this will have a higher position. Now,
And those who teach against the Torah will be least.
Least in the kingdom, if at all. But what I'm getting at is that God says, don't worry about your position. Jesus says, you know, when you go in, don't take the front seat, because you may be put down for somebody comes in with our position and you're asked to leave. He said, go take the worst seat, and if they want you, they'll bring you up. Now, I had my old friend, General Fuller, and that's what he was a retired lieutenant general, and that's what he said. He said, you don't make it in the military unless you have a mentor that brings you up in the command staff. And he says, if you have a mentor and they make it into the command staff, then you are guaranteed to make it. And he said, so you have to be careful who you choose in your life to follow. Now, that's the same way it is in God's kingdom. We have to be careful who we choose to follow and who we believe and what we believe. And if we don't tie it back to what God's word says, then we're apt to be deceived. How many people are deceived, do you think? Most, a lot, some. Are we being deceived?
They try.
We're coming out of that deception.
Coming out.
Well, we're,
Yeah.
But I like the fact that let's read God's word, find out what it says, and then do our best to keep it. Not do it. keep it. What's the difference between do it and keep it?
Guard.
Yeah, guard,
Guard.
Shemot.
Make it part of us. Not something that we're going to do. It's something that we're living, that we're walking, that we're applying in our lives. The Parasha refers to God as healer. Did it say God heals all your sicknesses?
It is in it.
What's that word? It says Rapha, a primitive root properly to mend, by stitching, to cure, to cause to heal, a physician, to thoroughly make whole. Do y'all think that God is our physician? I played this last year, and we've got new folks here, so I get to play it again. See if it works. Can you turn up the? Let's see. Maybe it's on here. There we go.
What a privilege to carry everything to God in prayer. Oh, what keeps me often forfeit. Oh, what needless pain we bear. All because we do not carry everything to God in prayer.
I want to sing the rest of the verses. Y'all know what the rest of them are?
I hear it, it's easier to remember.
Have we trials and temptations? Is there trouble anywhere? We should never be discouraged. Take it to the Lord in prayer. So,
We'll find out what's there.
and I like this part because it says God is our healer. He's our physician. He's there if we need him. But if we ignore his word, we don't apply it in our lives, if we're not walking it out. What's apt to be his attitude? If you're living your life for yourself, and then you get sick and you're praying for healing, if you've never depended on him before, why are you going to depend on him now? Right? I'm not saying that people aren't healed, but Jesus said when he was in his hometown, Nazareth, he said he couldn't perform any miracles because people didn't have any faith. So God can't heal where there's no faith. If you hadn't had faith all your life, is he going to have able to heal you at the end? I think it's important that faith be a part of our lives, our whole life, so that when those times of trials come, we have a listening ear. Next one here. Exodus 15:27 through 16:10. When they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 date palms, they camped by the waters. The entire Israelite community departed from Elim and came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai. On the 15th day of the second month, after they had left the land of Egypt, the entire Israelite community grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. The Israelites said to them, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt, when we sat by pots of meat and ate all the bread we wanted. Instead, you brought us into the wilderness to make this whole assembly die of hunger." Then the Lord said to Moses, "I'm going to rain bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. This way I will test them to see whether or not they will follow my instructions. On the sixth day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather on other days." So Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, I punched the button too quick. So Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, "This evening you will know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt. In the morning you will see the Lord's glory, because he has heard your complaints about him. For who are we that you complain to us?" Moses continued, "The Lord will give you meat to eat this evening, and more than enough bread in the morning, for he has heard the complaints that you are raising against him. Who are we? Your complaints are not against us, but against the Lord." Then Moses told Aaron, "Say to the entire Israelite community, 'Come before the Lord, for he has heard your complaints.'" As Aaron was speaking to the entire Israelite community, they turned toward the wilderness, and there, in a cloud, the Lord's glory appeared. So what was special about the oasis called Elim? Twelve springs, 70 ponds. So what were they passing by?
An oasis.
An oasis. But what is an allusion to?
The disciples, the apostles.
The 70 nations.
Well, they're passing by what they are to be. Water for the nations. Springs for the nations. Right? There's 12 springs, there's 70 ponds. What makes the ponds grow?
Water.
Who carries the water for the nations? Israel. So if we're in Israel, we're carrying the water for the nations. If we're not carrying the water, are the nations going to be successful? Are the nations going to come around? No. But what did they do? Got one sentence that said they passed by. Okay. That's the mistake that people make, is they pass by.
And they camped there by the waters. Where did they pass by?
Yeah, mine doesn't say
I
that.
mean, it's that sentence, that's all that it says, is that one sentence, is they
What
pass by.
verse?
Well, you're gonna make me have to go back.
Well, mine says, and then they came to Elim, and there were 12 springs of waters and 70 date palms, and they camped there by the water.
Right, but then they go on into the wilderness of Shur, the next sentence. Is that what it says?
Yeah, like the next chapter, then the entire community departed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that wasn't Israel, but we're going to stay there.
Right. I'm just saying that, why does it mention just there's 12 springs, 70 palms, they camp there, and then they're all, it doesn't, why was it even worth mentioning? Why was it, there's no words in the Torah that shouldn't be there. It doesn't say they drank out of the set, it doesn't say that there was fruit on the palm tree, it doesn't say anything about it, it just says there was 12 springs, 70 palms.
And they were date palms.
Yeah.
That is handy.
It's kind of like when God gives you a promise or plants something in your heart that you know He said is going to come to pass, and then go into the wilderness. He gives you that vision, that dream, or whatever, a promise, and now you're in the wilderness of sin. He just walks you by it a little bit.
But God didn't have his cloud or fire lead them. Did they just take off and go on their own?
No.
No, they're following the cloud, right?
Yeah, they're still following the cloud. They're still being led by God all the way through the wilderness.
Well, then it wouldn't matter if they just passed by if God was leading them, would it?
Yeah, but see, that's not the point I'm trying to make. I'm trying to make is that there's 12 springs and there's 70 palms, and they pass by. Why are they even mentioned?
Oh,
Because it's a significant deal. It's saying that,
It doesn't say that they were refreshed
doesn't say they're refreshed anything.
from
It
12
says they-
springs
Right.
and 70 date trees.
Yeah. I'm just saying that we can look at it now and say that's a picture of Israel and the nations. They came out of Egypt for the nations.
Yeah.
So we are going to be a light to the nations. And so there the 12 springs, the 12 tribes, are watering the nations. Okay?
And so God walked them by their purpose,
That's right. He walked them by their purpose.
but they didn't see it.
oh.
But they can't see it now, but we can see it looking back.
Right.
how important is it for us to look back and see?
Mm-hmm.
It's extremely important. Okay. I mean, I read that 100 times.
Yeah.
I just read past it. It didn't mean anything to me. I mean, I didn't think anything about 12 springs and 70 palms. I didn't think about the 70 nations. Most people don't think about anything. I was just like them. Right? Anybody else in here ever think about it?
My daddy planted a date when he was young, and as I got older, that date tree began to produce dates, and dates were pretty good, and they sure were prolific. The ones that we didn't pick up, but we were just growing like crazy. I don't know. So I've thought about dates, and I haven't really come to appreciate dates as like a candy until I was gray, but.
Well, when I was in Israel, the dates were ripe, and we went by some date palms, and I was amazed at the size of the clusters of dates on a date palm. Y'all ever seen them?
Oh.
It's impressive. Those things are. Anyway,
They can produce.
Exodus 16:11-36. The Lord spoke to Moses, I have heard the complaints of the Israelites. Tell them, at twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will eat bread until you are full. Then you will know that I am Yahweh your God. So at the evening, quail came and covered the camp. In the morning, there was a layer of dew all around the camp. When the layer of dew evaporated, there were fine flakes on the desert surface, as fine as frost on the ground. When the Israelites saw it, they asked one another, what is it? Because they didn't know what it was. Moses told them, it is the bread the Lord has given us given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather as much of it as a person needs to eat. You may take 2 quarts per individual according to the number of people each of you has in his tent. So the Israelites did this. Some gathered a lot, some a little. Then they measured it by quarts. The person who gathered a lot had no surplus, and the person who gathered little had no shortage. Each gathered as much as he needed to eat. Moses said to them, no one is to let any of it remain until morning. But they didn't listen to Moses. Some people left part of it until morning, and it bred worms and smelled. Therefore Moses was angry with them. They gathered it every morning. Each gathered as much as he needed to eat. But when the sun grew hot, it melted. On the 6th day, they gathered twice as much food, 4 quarts apiece. And all the leaders of the community came and reported this to Moses. He told them, this is what the Lord has said. Tomorrow is a day of complete rest, a holy Shabbat to the Lord. Bake what you want to bake, and boil what you want to boil, and set aside everything left over to be kept until morning. So they let it set aside until morning, as Moses commanded, and it didn't smell or have any maggots in it. Eat it today, Moses said, because today is a Shabbat to the Lord. Today you won't find any in the field. For 6 days you may gather it, but the 7th day, the Shabbat, there will be none. Yet on the 7th day, some of the people went out together, but they did not find any. Then the Lord said to Moses, how long will you refuse to keep my commandments and instructions? Understand that the Lord has given you the Shabbat. Therefore, on the 6th day, he will give you 2 days' worth of bread. Each of you stay where you are. No one is to leave this place on the 7th day. So people rested on the 7th day. The house of Israel named the substance manna. It resembled coriander seed, was white, tasted like wafers made with honey. Moses said, this is what the Lord has commanded. The 2 quarts of it are to be preserved throughout your generations, so that they may see the bread I fed you in the wilderness when I brought you out of the land of Egypt. Moses told Aaron, take a container and put 2 quarts of manna in it, and place it before the Lord to be preserved throughout your generations. As the Lord commanded Moses, Aaron placed it before the testimony to be preserved. The Israelites ate manna for 40 years until they came to an inhabited land. They ate manna until they reached the border of the land of Canaan. 2 quarts, or 1/10 of an ephah. So, manna was white, tasted like honey, looked like coriander seed. What was good about it and what was bad about it?
Well, it was good for the day that they were to pick it up, but it wasn't good the next day. It would be rotted. It wouldn't last.
Must have been nutritious.
Nutritious and delicious, right?
But you had to just pick it up off the dirt.
I wondered how it worked.
Right.
I know.
Matsei. And then, was it Dr. David Kim, the Korean doctor that was the doctor for one of the crown princes in Egypt? After Ron Wyatt had found Mount Sinai, Dr. Kim was given the royal car with the flags that could go. They didn't get stopped. The military would not pull them over, and he went and he spent a bunch of time there for the next 19 years, and he found pedestals, so they ground it up. And I've heard different people talk about, well, why did they do anything about it? Why did they boil it? Why did they do this? Why did they make bread out of it? You know, why did they grind it up with mortar and pestle? You know, why didn't they just eat it the way that it came up off the ground? But, you know,
Boring.
having refried beans for 40 years.
Yeah.
But it tasted like honey.
And then matzeh means, what is it?
Uh-huh.
Matzeh, you know, kind of like matzah.
Yeah, what is it? Well, the thing that it was a daily provision. God said, what did God always said, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will take care of itself. Just worry about today. Well, he says, I'm going to give you food every day. What do you got to worry about? So what's the whole purpose? What's the purpose of bread from heaven?
Dependence on Him.
Teaches them to rely on God.
Yeah, it relies on God. He says it's going to be there every day. You're going to get twice as much on the sixth day. And just rely on me for the seventh day. I'm always going to take care of the seventh day.
It was the bread of life.
Yeah.
And somebody else said that later on.
Yeah. He's the bread of life that comes down from heaven. So, what is according to your faith? In Matthew 9:21, Matthew, then he touched their eyes, saying, according to your faith, be it done to you. The people were to go out and to gather some every morning. So, according to their faith, they gathered it, right? Those that can gather little had no lack, and those that gathered a lot had no extra. What does that mean?
It's not sufficient.
It was sufficient for their faith. If they had strong faith, they just gathered a little and it was enough. But if they didn't have much faith, they gathered a lot. They didn't have any extra. We always get those two flopped backwards. You know, the people that went out and said God's going to provide, they just went and got some and it was enough.
Right.
Because they had strong faith.
Yeah.
But those that had a weak faith, they went and got a whole bunch because they didn't know if God was going to provide for them.
Right.
They didn't have any extra.
You see the contrast there? I always thought it was they went out and the people that were lazy just didn't get much. No, they went out and there was plenty. They said, God's going to provide every day. I have a strong faith in God. So I can just get, and it's going to be what I need. I have faith to do that. But those that don't have a strong faith, they went out and they gathered a whole bunch because they didn't trust. And so they're going to keep it overnight. It's going to turn to worms and smell. You see what I mean? So, God asked Moses, how long will you refuse to keep my commandments, even though he was not at fault?
No.
So, what was God saying?
Well, He told you when to pick it up and when not to.
No, it was kind of like he was blaming God for their lack of faith.
Oh, I see.
But was he really? Was he really blaming Moses for their lack of faith? Definitely. It's makes a silence of anticipation. Do you think God was saying, hey, these people have been in slavery for many, many years, and their lack of faith has to come from you so that they will have faith? So if you're kind and you're understanding, I can get on to you, and then they will understand that you're their leader, right? You know, and that's the way good leaders do. They don't criticize and be harsh to the ones that they put in charge. They say, I'm going to take responsibility for what they did, but I'm going to train them better. And that's what God was saying. He says, you know, why aren't they keeping my commandments? He's just saying, God, he's just telling Moses, you're the leader, you're going to have to buck up because I'm going to count on you. And that's what they did. How did it end up? What did Jesus tell the Pharisees? If you had believed Moses, you would believe me. Okay? So that's what God's saying. He says they have to believe you. They have to require your faith. And that's what we have to do in our lives. Is when it's my story and my joke. You know, when you don't live up to your expectation, and I knew better. I mean, you think it's a simple thing, but it's not. It's a devastating thing when it happens to you. You don't want it to ever happen again. So, who did the sages say were the main grumblers in the wilderness?
The arid rock.
No, that's not what the sages say. They say it was Dathan and Abiram. That they were the tribes that led the rebellion.
The other sons of the brothers of Korah.
It says the sages say that it was Moses' relatives.
Yes. You
that led the rebellion.
You showed that slide today. That was a good slide. Because right next to Moses' brother, or Moses, Aaron, the parents, the siblings of Moses' siblings, or Moses' siblings were all here, and the next one over, you had Aaron, Miriam, and Moses. The next one was Korah and Dathan and the next they were the cousins.
Right.
And so their tents were in formation. They were ones right next there also.
Right.
And Phineas, he's right in there close too.
Right. Yeah, he was the grandson of Aaron. I'm gonna get to the last one here. Yes. The entire Israelite community left the wilderness of sin, moving from one place to the next according to the Lord's commandment. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink, so the people complained to Moses, "Give us water to drink." "Why are you complaining to me?" Moses replied to them, "Why are you testing the Lord?" But the people thirsted for water and grumbled against Moses. They said, Why did you ever bring us out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst? Then Moses cried out to the Lord, "What should I do to these people? In a little while they will stone me." The Lord answered Moses, "Go on ahead of the people and take some of the elders of Israel with you. Take the staff you struck the Nile with in your hand and go. I'm going to stand there in front of you on the rock at Horeb. When you hit the rock, water will come out of it and people will drink." Moses did this in the sight of the elders of Israel. He named the place Massah and Meribah because the Israelites complained and because they tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" At Rephidim, Amalek came and fought against Israel. Moses said to Joshua, "Select some men for us and go fight against Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the hilltop with God's staff in my hand." Joshua did as Moses had told him and fought against Amalek. While Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up on the top of the hill. While Moses held up his hands, Israel prevailed. Whenever he put his hands down, Amalek prevailed. When Moses' hand grew heavy, they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat down on it. Then Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and one on the other, so that his hands remained steady until the sun went down. So Joshua defeated Amalek and his army with the sword. The Lord then said to Moses, "Write this down on a scroll as a reminder and recite it to Joshua. I will completely blot out the memory of Amalek under heaven." And Moses built an altar and named it, "The Lord is my banner." He said, "Indeed, my hand is lifted up toward the Lord's throne. The Lord will be at war with Amalek from generation to generation."
To this day.
This day. So at Rephidim, they had a campsite. There wasn't any water. So he told Moses to take a few of the leaders and go strike the rock so that they could get water. How many people came out of Egypt?
600,000 more.
600,000 men with women and children. Right? So maybe 2 million. Say if each family had 3 children, you could say there might be 2 million people coming out of there. So if they struck the rock and water came out, was it like a little creek running down? If you've got 2 million people to drink and animals to water.
It was a river.
It was a river. It had to be some serious water coming out. Yeah.
Have you seen the lake and the 12 wells that were dug around that lake, all in the top of that crater where the Rock of Horeb is? It's a beautiful thing to see.
I didn't even know that there were holes dug around.
Yeah, it's more of what Dr. Kim found.
Okay.
They were dual walled, so there was around each well of the 12 wells that were on the edge of the lake, away from the lake, were in my mind's eye, hot desert. The kids are playing in the lake, the water's flowing down, and you have the well away, one for each tribe. There was big rocks for the casing, the inner and outer casing, and then gravel, sand and gravel in the middle of it, so that as the water came from the lake through it purified, and they could pull up their the water.
That's cool. So what is Massah and Meribah? Massah, he named the place Massah and Meribah. Testing and arguing. They argued with Moses and they tested God, right? They questioned God's care by saying, "Is God in our midst or not?" So, what is that when you say, "Is God in our midst or not?"
Unbelief.
Is he with us?
Huh?
Is he with us?
Is he with us? But she said unbelief. Okay, you got a pillar of cloud and all this with you, and you got bread falling down from heaven.
Right.
And quail.
And quail. I mean, you've got all these things happening, and then you have the audacity to say, "Is God with us or not?"
Kind of like
I mean-
that. It's kind of like today. Maybe they thought that they were Burger King to get to have it their way.
If only I had wisdom like that.
Smart is only half the word.
So who were the Amalekites? that they
Esau's
fought?
grandson.
They were the sons of Esau, a tribe of nomadic warriors, right? So what was the Amalekites' sin?
Attacking the outside edges of the weaker part.
At which generation?
Yeah.
Amalek?
Where do you start?
Or you get to Agag, and then you get to
right here.
Haman,
Right here.
and then now you get to Hamas?
What is it right here where the Amalekites come out and attack? Did they have any reason to?
No.
Well, they thought the water was theirs because they own the land just because they've always been there.
So it made them, they were trying to claim
Probably
the water
jealous of the
and
water, yeah.
and the access to the.
Do you think it was water rats?
That's what they think.
Water rats, huh? Sounds like a cowboy and Indian movie, doesn't it?
Sounds like today.
Well, do you think the Amalekites realized that they were relatives?
Oh, yes.
I think they do, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They have the spirit of Esau
They've had a war going forever.
since the womb.
Yeah.
They were still trying to kill their brother Jacob.
Yes.
So, Amalek represents Satan's attempt to destroy Israel and therefore to prevent the advent of the Savior. You think that's correct? What are some of the reasons God wanted to blot out the memory of the evil people? Okay, Amalek attacked Israel out of sheer spite without warning and without having a political reason to do so.
Yeah.
Maybe there was water rats.
Yeah, they attacked them from the back. They attacked the old people and the children.
Yeah.
They
Amalek
did
attacked the
They came
weakest
from the
members
tunnels.
of Israel with malice. Is that what they're doing today? And the world is saying, those mean Israelites are protecting themselves. Why are they doing that? Amalek continued Pharaoh's sin of denying the Lord's power.
That's a fact.
Is that a fact? Amalek taught the nations not to fear Yahweh or to regard the Exodus as special. You know, that's all I've heard my whole life is the Exodus never happened. But now they're finding, you know, all kinds of evidence that it did happen. But I mean, you hear that kind of stuff all the time, that the Bible is a myth, it's made up, blah, blah, blah.
And is happening.
And it is happening. So, the Sar of Amalek, angel, is called Samael, or the Satan, and so on. In every generation there is a battle against Amalek, and that battle will not be over until God's throne is established forever over all. And that day comes soon. And that's why we say, why we pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Where is that from? Where is that from? Is it like the Talmud or something like that?
No, that's
Usually I think of Sar as Prince.
Prince, the
No,
Sar,
I
the
mean,
angel,
where did the
the
information?
Prince.
Shemot.
How come Biden's telling him to tell him to quit?
Because the guy in the closet's telling Biden that.
Yeah. The guy that's got his hand up and working his head
Yeah.
down.
The marionette.
The puppet
or the-
master. Yeah.
You gotta
I was
feel
wondering
sorry
if
for the
you
guy
got
that
the
hand back
information,
there,
that's
got to be
good.
uncomfortable.
That's true.
Okay. Now I've read this before. I'll read it again. The name Amalek begins with the letter Ayin, which is the I, and equals 240 in gematria. The same value for Safek, the Hebrew word for doubt. So Amalek and doubt go together. Amalek therefore suggests the eye of doubt, or even the severed eye, the cut eye, to chop or sever, in reference to the eye of Ayin. Amalek therefore represents spiritual blindness as it acts in the world. What are the ideas of spiritual warfare in the Bible, and how is it compared to today? I mean, Alvin, rightfully so, says we are in a spiritual war. I mean, we are participants in a spiritual war, and only the spiritual people are going to survive that war, physically and or spiritually. I mean, you know, when you read in Revelation, it says that all the people that lost their heads in the tribulation are saying, when will our redemption occur? And God says, there's a few more people need to have their heads lost. Okay? So, but God is reassuring us, you are going to be redeemed. The price you pay will be worth it. if anybody's not scared, you know, God says, be of good courage, do not be afraid. And that's hard. Do y'all ever, anybody ever get apprehensive about what tomorrow holds? Yeah, all the time. But God says don't do that. He says, do not, be of good courage, do not be afraid. What else does he say when he says do not be afraid?
Do not be dismayed.
Yeah, do not be dismayed. What
He's
is-
with us.
what
You
did-
believe in God, believe also in me.
Yeah.
For my
What-
Father's house.
What, yeah, that's what Yeshua told his disciples. He said, I go to prepare a place for you, so where I am, you may be also. And so, if we get discouraged, we need to remember that he has gone to prepare a place, that where he is, we may be also.
Amen.
And it says, and if I go to prepare a place, that means I will come and take you to it.
If it were not so, I would have told you.
Yeah.
Where did you get that information? That's good information. Where did you get it? Which of my?
I got it from,
Chabad,
no,
Bible learning.
just give me a second here, it's on the tip of my tongue.
We can tell.
Was it 119?
Stick your tongue.
John Parsons.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
gotcha.
John
Who's he?
Parsons.
John Parsons.
He has a webpage called Hebrew for Christians.
Yeah.
Okay, I know the website.
And I use a lot of his stuff. A lot of his stuff.
Just so you'll know, Lisa's been listening. She texted me and said on her trip to Saudi Arabia, she was told that the Amalekites were primarily giants and that their remains have been discovered in Midian. And she just offers that. She said they lived in a huge canyon, which I guess is where the Horeb water came from. Probably, but anyway, she concludes by saying, "Be strong and courageous," which is her favorite admonition. So, okay.
It's a good one too.
Yeah, that's right.
Thanks, Lisa. Okay, I'm just gonna proceed on to my old cartoon here. I got my picture of this so everybody get a good view. Dad, how do people make babies? That's a tough one there. I read this one to Joplin this morning. Most people just go to Sears and buy the kit, all of the assembly instructions. Yeah, that's it. I came from Sears? No, you were a blue light special at Kmart. Almost as good, and a lot cheaper. Dear, what are you telling him, Calvin, now?
Oh, we haven't had a Sears or a Kmart for a long time.
Joplin liked it
a
too.
Sears here up until about 2 years.
Next week is Yitro. Who is Yitro?
Uncle or father-in-law, Moses.
Moses' father-in-law. Yitro, Jethro. So let's bless God for giving us his Torah today. Join me.
Blessed
are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who gave us the Torah of truth, Yeshua, Messiah, God everlasting, set in our midst. Blessed are you, Lord, giver of the Torah.
And in Hebrew,
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, Yeshua Shekenu, v'chayei olam, natan v'chayenu, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu haTorah.
great peace have those who love your law. Nothing can make them stumble. The way of the wicked is like deep darkness. They do not know what makes them stumble. For if you believe Moses, you would believe me, or who wrote of me. But if you do not believe his writings, How will you believe my words? So if you can't believe the Torah,
That Yeshua gave to Moses.
Right.
Yeshua gave to Moses. Moses gave to us.
That is still right.
Thank you, Paul.
יברכך אדוני וישמרך, יאר אדוני פניו אליך ויחונך, יישא אדוני פניו אליך וישם לך שלום. יברכך אדוני וישמרך, יאר אדוני פניו אליך ויחונך, יישא אדוני פניו אליך וישם לך שלום. לאלפי דורות, משפחתך וילדיך, דורותיך אחריך, רוחו תלך לפניך, לצידך אחריך, מסביבך בליבך, הוא איתך, הוא איתך, בבוקר ובערב, בצאתך ובואך, בסבלותיך